21%. That's the approximate percentage of videos that The Weeknd dies or is shown dead in his solo videography work. And if we expand those criteria to include solo videos where he just gets hurt or threatened with violence, well, that number balloons to 47%, almost half of his solo videography work. But that doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of how frequently themes of death, faith, the afterlife, and more appear in his lyrics, making up approximately 40 to 45% of his discography. Yeah, that's right, I did the maths. I mean, even his Apple Music radio show is called Memento Mori, a Latin phrase that translates to remember, you must die. So what's with his obsession with death, and how does it tie into his acclaimed music career? Rising to fame in 2011 with 3 groundbreaking mixtapes in a single year, the mystery surrounding Abel Tesfaye, the individual we know as The Weeknd, seemed to bolster his popularity as people tried to figure out who he was. And that kind of anonymity is something he valued, as at that time, not only did he mention in the very few interviews he gave that he was insecure about his appearance, but he also noted that it gave him an honest insight into how his music was being received, in a genre that placed a lot of importance on the appearance and persona of the artist.
Was it deliberate? I mean, yeah, to an extent. I think we went on for about like almost a year with no pictures. Everyone was like, yo, who is this guy? Who's The Weeknd? How does he look?
You don't know if it was a band. Mystery makes everything sound better, I feel.
And in the same spirit as his feeling of looking unconventional in the genre, his music was just as fresh.
A sort of melancholy R&B and alternative soul music with very honest and disturbing truths. What young men think but will never say out loud. I've learned to pretty much just not give a and I kind of morphed this sound and it works.
As his music grew more popular, he released a self-directed music video for the song Rolling Stone from his second mixtape Thursday, alongside an open letter including a rare explanation for the music video's imagery. The title refers to both a cocktail of drugs, a common theme in The Weeknd's music, and the proverb, a rolling stone gathers no moss, which is commonly interpreted as meaning somebody who refuses to settle down and moves restlessly through the mainstream artist and pleads with his fans to stay with him through the journey. The video depicts The Weeknd in a studio, lit on one side as a woman behind him becomes progressively undressed as the video advances. In the open letter, The Weeknd reveals a major key to understanding all of his work, his love for storytelling through symbolism, and explains the music video, stating that the studio represents the two worlds he's stuck in, the gloomy side representing the mainstream, the other representing the underground that at the time he was a part of. The girl behind him represents you, the audience, the fans, and how his growing popularity as an artist, the world getting more familiar with his face as he puts it, and the face is an important symbol to remember for later, the audience loses interest, symbolized by the woman's clothes progressively coming off. The camera lights symbolize the crossover, and when they begin to flash, he looks away from the underground. The video for this song is so important to The Weeknd's narrative as an artist that he even selected that frame from it to use as the cover for the compilation album of all 3 mixtapes, Trilogy. And this idea of the refusal to settle, of constant evolution and rebirth is integral to understanding why The Weeknd dies so frequently in his videos. In every album cycle to date, except My Dear Melancholy, because that wasn't an album but an EP, The Weeknd encounters, but more frequently murders, earlier versions of himself. Think of the concept of the persona, an individual's social facade or front that, especially in the analytical psychology of Carl Jung, reflects the role in life the individual is playing, or the personality that a person projects in public, or a character in a fictional presentation. All of these definitions are important, okay, because the link between them all is the concept of the performance of identity. First, there's the musical alter ego, an alternate but distinct version of somebody's identity, often called a stage persona, such as Sasha Fierce, Beyonce's alter ego. To show the difference between Beyonce and Sasha, Beyonce even went as far as to divide her double album I Am Sasha Fierce into 2 parts, with I Am comprising of more sensitive, mid-tempo pop and R&B ballads like If I Were a Boy and Halo, whereas Sasha Fierce featured bombastic up-tempo songs like Single Ladies and Diva.
I guess I wouldn't be very entertaining on the stage. So Sasha comes out and she's fearless. She can do things that I cannot do when I'm in rehearsal.
And then there's a persona as a character, personified by an artist who Abel has stated greatly inspired him, David Bowie, an artist who incorporated a variety of distinct characters in his work, from the blind prophet on his last album Black Star, to Aladdin Sane, to the thin white Duke, to one of his most popular, Ziggy Stardust, the titular character from the concept album The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, an album that depicts the tale of an alien rock star sent to Earth before an impending apocalyptic disaster to deliver a message of hope, but ultimately dies after he acquires a massive fan base and is worshipped like a messiah, making him a victim of his own fame and excess, a commentary on celebrity worship, and a major inspiration for Abel's own character, Starboy, an allusion to the lead single from Bowie's album, Starman.
It was the way an author would write a book. Rather, I mean, it hadn't been utilized that much in records. It was a theater piece. It was still very hard for anybody to realize that a rock artist can go on stage and be a different person every time he goes on stage.
So in this way, The Weeknd's continuous musical reinvention is symbolized by him literally killing the earlier stages and personas in his musical journey. Let me explain. Starting from his debut studio album, Kissland, the director's cut of the title track music video begins the trend, with The Weeknd stumbling upon another version of himself, maybe his trilogy version, in a taxi. No brutal murder yet though. But the interesting thing is, doppelgangers in fiction and mythology are usually depicted as omens of death, and in this case it makes perfect sense. Given Abel says the album is like a horror movie that explores fear, even citing iconic horror movie directors like John Carpenter, David Cronenberg, and Ridley Scott as inspirations, with early versions of the songs even being named after them. In his first interview, Abel talks about how Kissland symbolizes the tour life and everything he never experienced in the 21 years of his life at the time, hence the primary setting of the album's visuals being Japan, to really illustrate his feelings of alienation.
Before it was released, I hadn't left my city for literally 21 years, and I had never been on a plane, not once. I've grown accustomed to hotels and drastic climate change. Conversations with women with different accents and stories told in those accents. I like to create characters based on different people I've met and relationships. I like to tell stories loosely based on real-life events.
Following this, his breakthrough album Beauty Behind the Madness follows a loose narrative about him selling his soul for fame in the music videos. While there's no official order to the videos, here's a basic idea. Starting off with Can't Feel My Face, The Weeknd plays music in a bar to no fanfare or response until a man who's commonly believed to represent the devil literally sets him on fire, sending all the patrons in the bar into a frenzy, and still burning, The Weeknd exits the bar and the camera melts. In the next video, Tell Your Friends, The Weeknd buries his Kissland persona, or the version of himself that's set on fire in Can't Feel My Face, and full of hubris, feeling he no longer needs him, kills the figure that gave him the fame he has, before driving down a road he can barely see, possibly representing his lack of guidance moving forward following this decision. And then following this, the music video for The Hills begins with him narrowly surviving a car accident before entering a house and seeing the personification of the devil once again, unable to escape him. That's one reading, but I could have totally missed the mark. Another video worth mentioning is the promotional video for the album, where the devil character is seen stumbling upon a billboard featuring The Weeknd and burns it, maybe in retaliation of him escaping his control before the police seemingly apprehend him. Next we go to Starboy, where the title track video has Abel's Beauty Behind the Madness persona tied up, and after a masked individual murders him, it's revealed that this is Starboy, The Weeknd's new persona, who destroys all remnants of the previous persona with a glowing cross while wearing one, which could very well be in direct contrast to the imagery invoking the devil in the previous album.
Starboy is the next chapter in this saga. He's a character that we kind of created, and more like braggadocious character that we all kind of have inside of us.
So this is your way of being able to express yourself with success?
Pretty much, yeah.
The other two videos that feature his death in this era are the videos for False Alarm, where a bank robbery captured in the first person goes very, very wrong. And the next video, I Feel It Coming, which continues the Starboy narrative by invoking David Bowie's Ziggy Stardust album by taking us to another planet where an eclipse causes him to turn to stone. After an unspecified amount of time, the two members of Daft Punk show up and find the remnants of the glowing cross from the Starboy video, which leads to the opening note of the Starboy song playing, suggesting an endless loop, as these two songs bookend the tracklist of the album. After this, and the My Dear Melancholy era, we enter into the second and final trilogy of The Weeknd's career. The trilogy started by his After Hours album, that will be completed by his upcoming untitled album as he ends the Weeknd persona. "I'm going through a cathartic path right now," he said. "It's getting to a place in a time where I'm getting ready to close the Weeknd chapter. I'll still make music, maybe as Abel, maybe as The Weeknd, but I still want to kill The Weeknd. And I will, eventually. I'm definitely trying to shed that skin and be reborn." This new trilogy, like the majority of The Weeknd's music, is hinged on the conflict between connection and the empty, hedonistic lifestyle of drugs, women, and other vices. As far back as his first mixtape from the first trilogy, House of Balloons, The Weeknd depicts the partying lifestyle as empty and vapid, desperately trying to tell himself that he's having fun when he knows he isn't. But in reality, he's using these substances to mask who he really is and avoid his reality. His entire discography can be summarized using one song, the original closing song of the second mixtape of the trilogy, Thursday, Heaven or Las Vegas. Abel opens the song by possibly referring to a verse in the Bible, in which God states his intentions to punish the children of people who worship false gods, when he sings that he's paying for all his father's sins. As he's spoken about before, even in his music, and you may believe this lack of a paternal figure has influenced his hedonistic lifestyle. The chorus is just as interesting, as he says the people around him want heaven and God, and his response is, because the people in this lifestyle with him are seeking an escape through substances, The Weeknd believes that his possession of them makes him the God they are seeking, illustrating the contrast between the religious heaven that symbolizes paradise and peace and Las Vegas, the hellish, superficial Sin City. So it's no surprise then that Abel would return to this imagery for his final trilogy, as the first music video, Heartless, literally takes place in Las Vegas. For this trilogy, The Weeknd went beyond using just his music videos and lyrics to tell the narrative, but even elaborate pieces of performance art, where he performed in character on TV performances and award shows that would directly tie into his next videos, like how the Blinding Lights performance on Jimmy Kimmel directly leads into the After Hours short film. After Hours, a direct reference to the Martin Scorsese film of the same name that takes place over one night, follows The Weeknd at the height of his debauchery, enjoying a night in Sin City, where after gambling and taking hallucinogenic substances, he crashes a car, gets beaten up by some bouncers, and dances in the street before hitchhiking to the Jimmy Kimmel show, where bandaged, he performs Blinding Lights, and afterwards, he walks off stage and his put-on smile slowly fades. At a train station, after putting on his sunglasses, The Weeknd is attacked and possessed by an unknown entity, which leads him to stalk a woman like a 70s-era slasher villain, before she gets him with an axe. Later, his head makes its way to a wealthy neighborhood in LA, where it's discovered by two bandaged women who are pretty unconcerned by the fact that he's dead.
Oh my god, he is so hot!
Then they take his head and do some awful things to it before reattaching it to another man's body, bringing him back to life, where he would later perform and receive an award at the AMAs. Discussing the significance of the bandages, in an interview with Variety, Abel says that it's a reflection on the absurd culture of Hollywood celebrity and people manipulating themselves for superficial reasons to please and be validated.
Disguised as a paradise with flashing lights.
At the beginning of the video, the two women are even seen listening to his song Escape from LA to really hammer this point home. According to Abel, the song Faith is about the darkest time of his life and speaks about his drug addiction and self-hatred. The song ends with him being arrested, a reference to the time he was actually arrested in Las Vegas after punching a police officer who took him into an elevator to break up a fight, and how easily he could have been killed in the altercation.
Thank the Lord didn't kill me in the elevator. Wasn't my time, she my soul down since later. She dead that day, never played fair.
The pursuit of fame has come full circle, as on the first entry on the first trilogy, the House of Balloons song, The Morning, The Weeknd speaks about how
Cali is the mission.
On Snowchild, on After Hours, the first entry of the last trilogy, The Weeknd pays that off.
Cali was the mission, but now it's leaving.
At this point of the narrative, there's a possible slight divergence. After his death, the music videos for Snowchild and Until I Bleed Out have Abel's life flash before his eyes. In Snowchild, he revisits every previous era and persona of his. In Until I Bleed Out, a mansion full of balloons, both of which allude to the regret and inescapability of his past sins. Snowchild ends by suggesting an endless loop, because The Weeknd walks to a city where he sees the version of himself in the Heartless music video, trapped in the persona of The Weeknd. The possible diversion is the Save Your Tears music video, where possibly sometime into the future, The Weeknd has had bad plastic surgery and performs in front of a masked, indifferent crowd, a strong reference to the Stanley Kubrick film Eyes Wide Shut, wherein, to put it very simply, Tom Cruise finds a disturbing cult that's difficult to leave. The fact that he's performing for them could be symbolic of how The Weeknd could end up if he continues down this route, as a fake, barely recognizable celebrity. He ends his performance by attempting to shoot himself, only for confetti to come out as the audience cheers. Returning to the Snowchild video, maybe The Weeknd manages to escape the endless loop, which leads us to Dawn FM, which continues the narrative after his death by having The Weeknd in purgatory, a liminal state where he's forced to reflect on his past decisions before going into the afterlife. With red being the primary color of Abel's After Hours persona, blue becomes one of the primary colors of the next chapter, a reference to an iconic scene in The Matrix where the protagonist Neo is given a choice to either leave and continue his ordinary life as he knows it by taking the blue pill, or have the true nature of reality revealed by taking the red pill. In the first music video of this era, Take My Breath, when The Weeknd inhales the substance from the gas mask he's given, we actually see this visually represented, with two characters on either side of the scene sitting on red and blue lights respectively. After The Weeknd inhales the substance, falling further into escapism and hedonism, the camera zooms out to reveal both lights have turned blue, and the color temperature of the grading has followed suit. When The Weeknd is incapacitated by the woman he meets, he wakes up in the next music video, Sacrifice, only to find what appears to be his soul is about to be taken by an individual cloaked in red. In the Vivid Gasoline video, an old version of The Weeknd, the primary character of this album, finds a younger version of himself at a disturbing party, but the young version of himself doesn't know the pain this lifestyle will cause him in the future, and when the two Weeknds spot each other, well, you know what happens. Young Weeknd beats up his older self and disfigures him. More symbolism, of course. And in Out of Time, the young Weeknd is haunted by his old self, who has a mask placed over his face by the narrator of the liminal Dawn FM radio station, played by Jim Carrey. And to tie into his desire to kill off The Weeknd, in the animated music video for How Do I Make You Love Me, paralleling the animated Snowchild music video that quite a few fans believe is the last canonical video of the After Hours story, the video ends with the old Weeknd character decaying and falling apart to reveal a baby boy, possibly representing the completion of the transition and the rebirth of The Weeknd as Abel Tesfaye. This leads us to the conclusion of this trilogy, and possibly the last album under the moniker of The Weeknd, which at the time of creating this video has no official singles, name, or album cover. 3 animated teasers featuring the same infant Abel character have been released though, and they give a lot of information about how this story might end. We see the young Abel running from his past demons and his past personas, the mask from Dawn FM in his hands. remember this. The young Abel is rescued out of a body of water, possibly symbolizing baptism and cleansing, by a mystery figure whom he follows towards an Ethiopian Orthodox cross in the sky. After climbing the stairway to heaven, young Abel finds himself at the start of the Weeknd's journey once again, at the House of Balloons. The lyrics of the previewed song says, "All I have is my legacy, no afterlife." Abel follows the cloaked figure into the house, where he sees deflated balloons. The cross from his Starboy persona hangs off a statue, and a Starboy picture hangs on the wall. Abel then follows the cloaked figure into a clock where time goes backwards, and as the clock gears past Abel's body, we see every single persona of the Weeknd's different hairstyles, ending on the young Abel. After traveling into the past, Abel is in a church, where he once again sees every Weeknd persona before him, probably symbolizing possible futures, as smoke behind him seems to be engulfing everything. Reflected in a mirror, we see the figure cloaked in white from before, reaching out to Abel, before it's revealed that the figure is Abel's mother. The final pose as she holds young Abel is a reference to the Ethiopian artist Tekle's painting, Mother Ethiopia. These teasers could be interpreted as a kind of retelling of the biblical parable of the prodigal son, where Abel's life of sin through the persona of the Weeknd figuratively returns to his mother, who will lead him down a righteous path this time, and has been watching hopefully for his return. It makes sense too, because Abel's mother's name is Samruit, like Abel's name, of Ethiopian origin stemming from Amharic, and means God is my light, a name which in Ethiopian literature and folklore is often given to characters who are guided by divine light.
You're making videos that are hardcore. I mean, you're killing yourself in one of them. Another one is like...
Oh yeah, my mom hates that.
I wondered about that, right?
Yeah, of course. You gotta understand, like, she's just happy that I'm doing something that I love. You know, there was a point where dropping out of school and getting into fights and not being home forever because I left home. You know, there's much scarier and more heartbreaking things you could do to your parents. You know, she's just happy I'm not dead or in jail at this point, you know? And it's just like the fact that I get to make music and make millions of people happy.
An important detail about this teaser, though, is that interestingly, on the director Evan Lawson's website, the description notes that this paradise he reaches is false. What that means for the narrative of the album remains to be seen, but what's interesting is how after we see Abel and his mother, we hear what appears to be her voice calling his name, possibly waking him up out of the liminal space he found himself in on Dawn FM. Also, huge shout out to the Weeknd subreddit because I've seen some amazing theories about this last teaser, one of which particularly caught my eye, one that proposes aliens. It theorizes that these images on the walls are of aliens, which ties into some of the promotional material for Dawn FM, like this alternate album art and the tour materials. It could also explain this image that some people believe is young Abel being abducted in the first teaser. But keep that tinfoil hat on because this gets more interesting. Something I noticed is that the only identifiable era in the House of Balloons is Starboy, his only persona that's portrayed as having come from another planet. This could tie the recurring image of the Weeknd following and being blinded by a singular light together, beginning from his possession in After Hours, to going into the light of the afterlife in Dawn FM, to the same in these teasers, where he's blinded by a light in the church, and more alien imagery, and every Weeknd persona reflecting in the mirrors surrounding him, maybe showing his inevitable fate before he's rescued by his mother. Maybe this gives credibility to the idea that he's being misled by these alien figures. Meanwhile, he could be fighting for his life in the hospital. Maybe he's in a coma. Someone managed to get the stems of the Dolby Atmos version of the Dawn FM song Every Angel is Terrifying, and there's some interesting details in the background.
Even if they pressed me against their heart.
You're in the hospital.
A hospital is an interesting liminal space. You can either die and move into the afterlife or heal and return to the living. But we'll find out what this all means sooner or later.
When the light comes, it feels that much better, I feel. That's why a lot of the music, when you listen to my albums, it starts off very dark, and then it gets dark, 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 and then when it gets to the peak, it's the darkest it could ever get. But then when you get to the end of the record, when you feel that light it feels that much better.
And that's why he calls himself the king of the fall, the transitional season between summer and winter where leaves die and the temperature goes cold. A metaphor for the tone and subject of his music, cycles of endings setting the stage for new beginnings. To finish off, tying back to the image of the mask and the performance of identity, we have to remember that in Latin, the word persona originally referred to a theatrical mask. During the Weeknd's After Hours Till Dawn tour, he begins his set by performing 2 songs in a mask, the opening track of After Hours, Alone Again, and Gasoline, the second track of Dawn FM, before taking the mask off in jubilation. The opening line of the final trilogy might tell us why.